Hi boys and girls. Today we are going to start looking at some revising and editing strategies. Here is a draft of my personal narrative, which was also an example of my best day ever. I looked out the window. Dad should be arriving soon, I thought. I saw his black Jeep Cherokee, but what was behind it? There was a trailer behind it. My dad told me that he was building a bookcase for me, but I didn't think it would be that big. I ran out the door to meet him and gave him a big hug. He opened the door to the trailer and I saw the bookcase wrapped up in blankets like a mummy. I still didn't have an idea of what it looked like. Finally, we brought it inside my condo piece by piece. It took all day to put it together and stand it up against my wall. I love my new bookcase. Now, this draft still needs a lot of work. So, take a look and see what happens next. Now, boys and girls, you can see a lot of work that I did. One of the first things I did was to make sure that my lead sentence was interesting. Sometimes we know an interesting way to start is to have an action. And that is what I did right here. Another thing that I did was I took out a lot of extra information. It doesn't matter what kind of a car it was. I looked at some other things where I could add more things, more thoughts and more feelings. Like we worked so hard and it looked even more beautiful than I imagined. Something caught my eye. And then I described what the bookshelf was like. And it was also thought that possibly I could describe how heavy the bookcase was. Now, boys and girls, take a look at this next draft. I took a lot of the information from the old draft and wrote a new draft that I think is much better. Dad should be arriving soon with my new bookcase, I thought, looking out the window. Finally, out of the corner of my eye, I saw his black truck. I continued watching and noticed that he was towing a trailer behind his truck. Wow, I thought, is the bookcase Dad made for me so big it wouldn't even fit into his truck? After he parked, I ran out the door to meet him and gave him a big hug. Dad opened the door to the trailer and I saw the bookcase wrapped up in blankets like a mummy. There were so many pieces. We brought them in piece by piece. These pieces were the heaviest things I ever lifted. Even though it was a lot of hard work, I was so happy because I knew Dad had made it just for me. After we got the pieces inside the house, my brother-in-law Charlie had to come to help put up the shelf that goes across the two tall bookshelves. He and Dad each had to stand on ladders on opposite sides while the bookshelf was anchored to the wall. I was worried that one of them would drop it and get hurt, but they didn't. Finally, after a long day of happy work, I had my beautiful white bookcase. It filled up the whole wall, and now I had lots of space to put pretty things. But the most special part was that I got to spend the day with my dad, and every day I can look at the bookcase and think of him. Well, that's a lot better than the last draft after all of those changes, but you know what? Even on this draft, I found some more changes I could make. Look at all of these things I also did. I did some ratiocination to make sure I had my uppercase letters where they go. And sometimes I added some extra words that I just didn't need. Words like so, those are not helpful words. All they do is take up space. And secondly, there were some other words that we could take out. Inside the house, well, we figure we're inside the house, so those words can just go. But something like instead of pretty things, I could be more specific and talk about vases and flowers and books with interesting covers. And instead of just describing the whole wall, or instead of just saying the whole wall, I can talk about the blank, empty space. So take a look when you do your revising. Try to think of ways that you can have an interesting lead to start your story. Look for lots of dialogue and lots of thoughts and feelings that will help the reader really understand what your day was like. And there's the bookcase in the end. It's a lot more full now. Finally, boys and girls, make sure that you keep these things in mind as you're revising and editing. You need an interesting lead sentence. You need to include lots of thoughts and feelings. Take out any words that don't add meaning, and make sure that your events go in logical order.